Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Right on Crime podcast. My name is Britt Allen with Right on Crime. In states across the nation, Right on Crime works to support conservative criminal justice, from government accountability and legislation to ongoing community initiatives. And the work never ends for our incredible state directors. So I am so excited to introduce to you guys my special guest and our West Virginia and Virginia State Director, Danny Murphy. How's it going, Danny?
Fantastic.
Good
afternoon, Britt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome to Austin. What do you think so far?
It's fantastic.
Yeah?
It's a little weird, but I love it.
I mean, we are always on a mission to keep Austin weird.
That's what I hear.
This is probably the least weird corner in Austin, though, so you're in a safe place.
Good.
But welcome.
Thank you.
So for anybody who maybe doesn't know you or know what you do, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So I serve as you mentioned, I serve as the state director for Right on Crime for both Virginia and West Virginia. Mm-hmm. I also serve as a criminal defense attorney. Mm-hmm. I'm in private practice with a law firm in Southwest Virginia. I joined Right on Crime just a little over a year ago, and in fact went into private practice just over a year ago, having most recently served as an assistant United States attorney, that is a federal prosecutor for the Western District of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And then prior to that, I served a career as an Army judge advocate, an attorney on active duty with the U.S. Army, having retired out of the Pentagon in 2020.
Wow.
And so I've enjoyed a great deal of perspective that I think allows me to view criminal justice reform from both a former prosecutor's perspective and now currently as a criminal defense attorney's perspective, and the opportunities that it gives me to try to advance conservative and meaningful criminal justice reforms has just been tremendous.
Amazing. So criminal justice, I mean, it's a crazy world. There's a lot of nuance. How did you even get involved in criminal justice? Like, what was it for you that made you decide to pursue that route?
Sure. Well, first of all, it was the military initially that brought me into the legal field. And so when I went to college in North Carolina, and I have always had an interest in military service. Right. And so I was an ROTC graduate, and I went into the Army right out of college. But I also had an interest in the law. And so I applied for a program shortly after commissioning into the Army. I applied for a program that the Army had that paid for me to go back to law school. Okay. A fantastic program, the Army's FLEP program. I then went into the Army as a judge advocate, and I was immediately drawn to litigation. And within the Army, litigation primarily means criminal litigation and working within the criminal prosecution and criminal defense realm. So I was a trial counsel. I was a prosecutor for the Army. I ended up loving what I was doing. I was able to kind of navigate my career to where I was able to primarily focus my practice within the criminal world. So I was what was called a special victim prosecutor for a number of years, and in that respect, I focused my prosecution on violent felony offenses and sexual assault offenses. And so I focused my military career largely within criminal law. A lot of Army judge advocates diversify and do a number of different things, but I was just drawn to the criminal practice. Yeah. And then when I retired from the Army, I again focused what was it that I wanted to do. And I would tell you that I am largely, even though I currently am a defense counsel, I'm largely wired as a prosecutor. And so when I retired from the Army, I sought careers or career opportunities that would allow me to continue to do that. Right. And so I was offered a position with the U.S. Attorney's office for the Western District of Virginia, and that brought me from the D.C. suburbs down to Southwest Virginia. There we go. And I absolutely loved it. I had a fantastic time prosecuting cases for the U.S. government. Yeah. But then I was approached by our leader, Britt Tolman, about a year and a half ago, or about 2 years ago, I suppose, about leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office and joining Right on Crime to, as you said, to advance conservative, principled positions on criminal justice reform. And I draw on experiences that I have had as both a prosecutor and then now as a defense counsel to try to focus the initiatives that I advance in Virginia and West Virginia on where I think we can make meaningful, impactful change that both protects our communities from violent offenders, but is a little bit more compassionate and geared towards rehabilitation and reentry for those people who are eventually going to join our communities again.
Yeah.
And so it's been my pleasure to work in both West Virginia and Virginia, and we've got session coming up, and I'm excited about a few initiatives.
Oh my gosh, I know, and I can't believe it's coming up as soon as it is. But I mean, and thank goodness that Brett did approach you, because you're just such an amazing addition to the team, and we're so happy that you're on board. So I want to talk a little bit about one of your states specifically.
Sure.
Maybe today we'll just hone in on Virginia.
Sure.
So the criminal justice system, there's a lot that we get wrong, right? But there's a lot that we can also do really well.
Sure.
So when it comes to your specific state, what do you feel like Virginia does really well?
Sure. Well, first of all, Virginia is a very unique state. You know, we've got pockets of Virginia that are metropolitan areas, obviously the Washington, D.C. suburbs, Richmond, the southeastern seaboard. But the vast majority of Virginia as a state is far more rural.
Right.
In its sort of land mass and its demographics and that sort of thing. And so one thing that I would tell you that I think we do particularly well is Virginia's Department of Corrections boasts, I think it's right now, it's the second lowest recidivism rate nationwide. Really? And so a 3-year recidivism rate of 20.6%. And so we talk about that, and let me caveat that. What they mean by that is specifically are state responsible inmates. And so that's a recidivism rate for people that are returning to state facilities. That's Department of Corrections facilities, not our local and regional jails.
Okay.
And so that distinction is meaningful because it doesn't capture the inmates who may engage in relatively minor or petty offenses that bring them back into the jail system.
Yeah.
It speaks primarily to people who are incarcerated for lengthier terms of incarceration. And so why is that? So why is Virginia's recidivism rate so, relatively speaking, so low? Well, I've had an opportunity to work with our Department of Corrections leadership, and I'm incredibly impressed in a couple of different things. I'm incredibly impressed with the priorities that they put into reentry and rehabilitation programs within the Department of Corrections facilities. One example of those is Virginia's got a program that they call their CCAP program. It's the Community Corrections Alternative Program. There are about 7 or 8 of these facilities throughout Virginia. They are penal systems. They are prison systems. I mean, when somebody is in the system, they are incarcerated still. Right. However, these are individuals who have been identified as having maybe a high likelihood of success and a focus towards their rehabilitative efforts. They are given particularized schooling. They have an opportunity to get their GED or advanced education if they're pursuing that, and they also get hands-on training on a few different, a variety of different trades. And so, for example, in a facility that I recently visited, the Appalachian Men's facility in Honaker, Virginia, they've got a school for brick masons. They've got a school for HVAC repair, trades that can lead people to meaningful employment upon their release. And I think a program like that is directly responsible for Virginia boasting such a low recidivism rate. And so in my estimation, emphasizing programs like that in our corrections systems, that's smart on crime. That's right on crime. That's a meaningful approach towards rehabilitating people, not just to punish, but in fact to rehabilitate and return people to society with the skills that at least allow them to not turn back towards criminal behavior.
100%. I heard something the other day that said, today's inmate is tomorrow's neighbor.
That's right.
And that made so much sense to me, especially when it comes to like all the things you guys are doing right in Virginia when it comes to lowering recidivism and really focusing on reentry. So that's amazing. And that's obviously something we support very much so at Right on Crime. So on the flip side of that, we've got the good. Now let's talk about what are the gaps and opportunities you feel like need to be filled in Virginia?
Well, I think there are a number of gaps, and I think we have opportunities, and we're working on one thing in particular that I'll touch on, which is earned compliance credits. And so in Virginia, we have something, a program that's set up for earned sentencing credits, and that is, or earned sentence credits, and that's somebody who's been incarcerated, who goes to a prison system, and they can pursue training or education or programs and that sort of thing to earn credit towards their sentence.
Right.
But what happens when somebody is released from prison, right? And so almost across the board, if an offender or an inmate is released from prison, they are placed on a period of probation following their term of incarceration. Well, how do we incentivize somebody to reduce that period of probation? Right now, Virginia does not have any program in place that an individual can try to chip away the amount of time that they've got on probation. And so earned compliance credits is that program. Essentially, it says, hey, look, for example, if you were to pursue a secondary degree, if you were to pursue training in a trade, and you were to receive a particular certificate that allows you to pursue meaningful employment, we'll reduce your time on probation. So it's so it both incentivizes people to take accountability and responsibility for improving their situation. And it also rewards people who actually focus on their own rehabilitation. So that's a bill that I'm working with a couple of delegates, and it's been sent in for drafting in advance of session. So I'm hopeful that we can get that through.
Great. Fantastic. And then I know we talked a little bit earlier about another thing that we were talking about was early access to counsel.
That's right.
You had a really interesting story not too long ago that relates back to that.
So that's what I would call this. I would put this in the gap right now. Right now, we're unfortunately, I think a lot of people when they focus on criminal justice, they look at the violent offenders, the long-term people, the people that are going to be in prison systems for a long time, and our legislators always focus on we've got to be tough on crime, we've got to protect our communities, and that is true.
Right.
But the vast majority of offenders that are in our systems are not violent offenders. They are people for any number of reasons who, due to their circumstances, their family situations, they find themselves wrapped up in the criminal justice system. And an issue that I have is that our system right now has far too many inefficiencies built into it. That just damage the spirit and the humanity of our citizens. And the story that I told you about was I recently represented a client in Southwest Virginia who I was court appointed. I was appointed by the court system to represent him. Can you imagine this particular court system doesn't email or even fax the notice to the attorney that you are set to represent this person. Instead, they put a letter in the mail.
That's crazy.
And so I was appointed to represent a gentleman who had been arrested on a charge of disorderly conduct. And the facts were he was homeless and he was walking down the street in a city and he had been drinking. He was intoxicated and he was wearing his boxer shorts. And that's what he was charged with.
Yeah.
He was charged. He was incarcerated on that charge because he had no home plan. He had no place to release. He didn't receive a bond. He had a history of missing court dates by virtue of his personal situation.
Right.
Well, he was incarcerated. I didn't get the notice that I was supposed to represent him in this case until I got a letter in the mail, and it was after the Thanksgiving holiday. So it took almost about a week and a half for me to realize that I've got a gentleman that's sitting in a jail facility pending a trial on a very minor matter.
Yeah.
And the reality is, as happens with cases all the time, is the court puts that case on that arresting officer's next court date.
Right.
So this gentleman's court date was set for January 24th. He was arrested before Thanksgiving in November, and his court date was set for January 24th on a disorderly conduct charge. Now, the reality is, that's not the fault of the prosecutor. That's not the fault necessarily even of the judge or of any person individually. It's just that our system is not designed to identify far more efficient ways to handle these matters. So I'm happy to say that I was able to meet with the client, meet with the prosecutor, get his case moved up, and we resolved his matter in a manner, I believe, effectively, such that he was released on the day of his court hearing.
Wow.
Well, so not only did that address the humanity of it. Not only this gentleman did not need to be sitting in a jail.
Right.
He needed to be home for Thanksgiving with his family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's homeless, but he has family in the area.
Right.
He does suffer from some mental illness. He needs to be treated. He does not need to be in a jail facility. And he sure as heck doesn't need to be sitting in a jail for over 60 days pending a trial on a disorderly conduct.
Right.
So that's an example of a judicial inefficiency that unfortunately I think is all across Virginia. And I think it's something that we need to address.
Yeah.
Now, it's not something that I'm advancing a bill on this session. It's not something that I've got teed up, but it is something that I want to work on with legislators.
That sounds amazing. And thank goodness that it's at some point on your docket. So I know you mentioned session is coming up.
Yes.
Coming up in January.
That's right.
So what are your goals or hopes for this next coming session?
Well, so this is going to be a unique session in Virginia. We've got a divided government. We've got a obviously conservative governor in Glenn Youngkin.
Right.
But our General Assembly is a democratically controlled General Assembly. And so I think what we're going to have to do is work in the margins to find issues where we can truly compromise issues. And that's where I think earned compliance credits is something that we'll be able to move forward with this year. I'm excited about that. I'm working with colleagues on a prosecutor-initiated resentencing program. Whether or not that's ready for prime time this year is to be determined. Yeah. We need to feel that out a little bit. And then I'm working with a group that's piloting a program that will get early access to counsel. And so, bringing counsel in sooner within the program, we're hopeful will help our judicial efficiencies.
Amazing. Well, we can't wait to see everything that comes out of session for you next year. So criminal justice, while I know we have a lot of fun in the work that we do, it can feel like a really, really heavy place sometimes.
Sure.
So what makes you feel optimistic that either your state or even the country in general is at least headed in the right direction when it comes to our criminal justice system?
Okay. So first, I'll speak only to the state because that's what makes me optimistic is truly the genuine dialogue that is out there. The issues that I think are important are no longer just important to me.
Right.
Our legislators, fortunately, Governor Youngkin has a program. He's advancing a program specifically gearing resources towards treatment for mental illness. The prioritization of criminal justice reform and mental illness focus I just think has gotten far greater attention over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And we have legislators who are interested in this. And so I'm motivated by that. I'm encouraged by that. And I'm also, I will tell you, as an attorney, as a defense counsel, I believe a prosecutor would be a far better prosecutor if he or she serves as a defense counsel. And I think a defense counsel is a far better defense counsel having served as a prosecutor.
Sure.
I am motivated and encouraged by the work that I've been able to accomplish with clients in the criminal justice system, because I believe that with the right systems in place and the right judicial officers and the right prosecutors and defense counsel, we truly can receive or achieve far more just results that both protect our communities from violent offenders, but also rehabilitate people and get people back out of the jails, out of the prisons, and back to leading truly meaningful lives and contributing to their communities.
That's so good. And then, Danny, if anybody wants to keep up with you and the work that you're doing in your states, where can they find you and follow you?
Sure, of course. So I'm not a huge social media guy. I have a Twitter handle, Danny Murphy. Actually, I don't even know what my Twitter handle is. We'd have to look it up. But it's on my Right on Crime page as well. Right. So you can go to rightoncrime.com, and my profile is there. It's got a link to my Twitter, my LinkedIn, my Instagram profile as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Danny. You're so much fun to talk to and just a wealth of knowledge. So thank you all so much for joining us on the Right on Crime podcast today. To find out more about these issues and more conservative solutions from across the nation, you can visit our website at rightoncrime.com. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.